I'm going to show you how I got the drums to go from this to this. What's going on, everyone? I'm Stu Watts, and I'm going to take you through a recent track that I mixed, produced, recorded. It was by a band called Bitch Eyes. This song is called Booze Song. So let's get into it. I got my coffee, instant coffee, only the best here at Marshall Street Studios, and my water. So let's get into it. First of all, let's have a look at the routing. So these are all the channels. Kick in, kick out, which is then bussed into a kick organic bus. Then we've got a kick trigger or kick sample, snare top, snare bottom, which is bussed into an organic snare bus, just these organic snares. We've got the snare trigger or snare sample, rack, floor, overhead left and right, which is bussed into the overhead bus. Then we've got hats, ride, room left and right, which is bussed into a rooms bus. And everything then is going into this drums bus. Then we've got some reverb channels as well. So we've got two snare reverbs and an overall drums reverb. So that being said, let's have a listen to how everything sounds without any processing. Let me just turn off the snare trigger and the kick trigger. So that's the raw drum sound. Pretty standard setup, nothing too complicated, no wacky mics. It was all pretty generic setup. Kick in, we had a Shure Beta 91A. Kick out would have been the Sennheiser 602. The snare top would have been my Audix 51. The snare bottom was a SM57. The rack and floor would have been my Audix D2 and D4. The overheads were my Audix 51s. Then the hats, I probably would have had a 51 on it. Sorry, not a 51, a 57. The ride, probably something similar, either that or the Sennheiser, those silver mics, can't remember the model number. And the rooms would have been my SM7, and that was pretty much the setup. It's all in that room that is that way that you can't see at the moment. It all gets going through my PreSonus, not mine, the Marshall Street Studios, PreSonus Studio Live 24. So that's all the routing. That's all the setup. Pretty basic, nothing complicated. From there, I edit all my drums to a grid, make sure it's all lined up schmick. Have a listen. All snapped to a grid, but you can't tell that there's any editing because of the way that I edit. Mad dog, so fuck it. All right, so pretty standard. Let's go through top down. So let's listen to everything with the processing on. That's how it sounds there. All right, so on the drum bus, which is not something that I do from the start. Let me just turn off these unsolo safe, these auxiliary channels, turning the reverb off basically. So I usually do this towards the end of getting the overall drum sound. So first of all is the Monster, basically just adds a whole lot of punch and brings the drum together, makes it sound fuller. Then I had a D-click because there was one section in the song that had a click, so I automated that in and out. And then the multiband dynamics plugin, which comes with PreSonus Studio One. Amazing multiband. It's the best multiband I've ever used. Honestly, like better than, FabFilter or anything like that. The PreSonus one just kills. Sounds so transparent. It's really easy to use. You can check out some other tutorials on how to use it if you're interested. But in this instance, you can see there's the ratio here. It's all 1-to-1. So that means there's no compression. So basically I'm using this as an EQ tool, and it's only adding a little bit of gain from 950 to 7K, and then 5 decibels, 7K up to 20K. So let's have a listen with those off. And I'll bring them in one by one. So you can hear that punch and the solidness, the glue that adds. That doesn't do anything because it's in bypass, because it's automated. And then the multiband. Bit of clarity in the top end. Pretty simple stuff. All right, let's go starting with kick in. Now, one thing I want to mention with all of my processing is it's not over the top. It's really small moves. There's nothing crazy going on in this mix. There's no like extreme, there's no extreme processing. It's pretty much EQ and compression, and that's pretty much it. There's no real crazy stuff going on. You can see I haven't got too many plugins on any one channel. The most I've got any one channel is 3 plugins. So it's nothing crazy. You don't have to go crazy with your plugins to get a really full drum sound. One thing that's also important to note is when you're looking at your individual channels, you want to make sure that the phase is aligned. Kick to the snares, to the overheads, to the room. Phase is so important to making sure you have the fullest drum sound as possible. Otherwise, you might try and account for it with EQ and you'll just ruin your mix because things will be out of phase to start off with, and there's only so much EQ you can do to fix that. You'll just notice if your phase is out from one channel to the next, it just ruins the whole drum sound. So first and foremost, you want to start with getting your phase all in from channel to channel. There are plugins that'll do that for you. One that I know of is called Auto Align. I don't own it. I use, as you'll see soon, for very minute phase changes, I use Precision Time Align by Eventide. And I'll go through that a little bit when I get to that channel. But yeah, again, it's just to make sure that the phase is in alignment. I didn't have to really do it too much to any of the channels because when I was recording, I was making sure that the phase was in the recording stage. So I didn't have to do as much of that. Definitely from song to song, depending on where the mics are, you might find that you have to do some manipulation in terms of phase on certain channels. In this instance, I didn't really have to do too much because it was all relatively in. I would have checked all the phase on the individual channels to make sure it sounded full. And in this instance, it didn't look like that I had to do that much. Coffee break. All right, so let's have a look. Kick in. I'm going to go channel to channel, and then I'll show you how they all work together. So let's start with the kick in. I always start with kick and snare, and then I go toms, and then I go overheads and then rooms, and then I bring it all together and make sure it all meshes well together. It's just how I like to work. Obviously, as you're going, you want to make sure that it sounds good in the scheme of the whole mix, by, listening not in solo, but I get things to a good starting point mix-wise on the individual channels first, and then I get it to sound good when they're all together. It's very easy for me to tell whether something isn't sounding good when I unsolo things, and then you just kind of adjust as you go. And that takes time to learn what that is, like what those changes are that need to be made. But I mean, I've been doing this for over 10 years now, and when I'm listening in context, I can just hear whether, something doesn't sound fat enough or, there's not enough attack or anything like that. But just know that comes with time. You don't have to know that sort of stuff straight away. It's just important that you try things out and keep keep dialing things in as you go, and you will get better with time. I listen to mixes from back in 2018, even 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and I'm like, what? I don't know how I got that drum sound, but that's where I was at that time, and you just progress and you get better as time goes on. So don't stress too much if you're like, fuck, why can't I get mine to sound like that? Just do your best and just keep learning and keep trying to apply the knowledge that you've learned. And as time goes on, the more mixes you do, the more different styles of songs that you work on, different genres, etc., the more knowledge you'll have to apply to get it to sound better and better as with each mix. All right, enough of that. Let's get into the channels. So as I said, we're starting off with kick in. Let's have a listen to how it sounds isolated, and then we'll have a look at the plugins. So this is a Beta 91, Shure Beta 91A. Amazing mic. It's mic. It is a plate mic. Honestly, you just chuck it in the center of the kick drum, and this is the sound you get. Unreal. So there's not much that you really have to do here when it comes to the processing. So let's have a look at what I did here. I'll start with, only 2 plugins here, Virtual Mix Rack and then Pro Q. And let's turn this on and turn all these off, and we'll go one by one. So first of all, started with the virtual channel. Let me just set a loop going here so I don't have to keep pressing stop and start. All right, so virtual channel. I've got it set to the Neve emulation. And when you move the input and output up and down, I've got them linked so they'll both move together. You'll notice certain sonic changes when you have it dialed in less. There's no saturation or distortion imparted onto the signal, so it's a drier sort of a sound. More attack, less glue. And when you push it up, you'll notice that it starts to red light and you'll hear some distortion. So let's just do that. So where I had it is sitting at about plus 9.5 dB. Not too much sonic change, but it just gives it a bit of a glue and a little bit of that Neve emulation. Without it, it kind of has a digital sort of a sound. So this imparts a little bit of an analog quality. Then from there, I've got the gate, the drum gate. Amazing plugin. Start off using the detection filters. So this basically tells you where you want it to listen from. And then you set the level that you want it, the threshold level that you want it to start letting through the gate. And this transient detection just is like a minute kind of tweak to where it picks up the transient. So if you want it to let more of the transient through or less of it through, this is a really accurate, like for drums, really accurate way to fine tune the gate. From there, you can choose the range. I had a negative 100, meaning that the gate, when the gate isn't open, it's completely silent. The release set to 218 milliseconds with the slower slope. The attack, I forgot to mention, I've got the really aggressive attack going. So as soon as it is through the gate, it's like, it's hard to explain, but yeah, it's not a soft attack. It's a really hard attack. So letting all of the attack through. Let's see if it makes a difference. See, the smooth one cuts off a lot of that beta attack, and for this rock song I wanted heaps of that beta attack. Then from there I've got a bit of D-bleed, meaning that it doesn't allow, after the initial attack, it doesn't allow anything above 648 hertz through, so it's just cleaning it up. Without it, sometimes you can get, especially if it's a mic that's near a cymbal or something, you can let some of that cymbal through that you don't want. So it's good to clean up with these dynamic filters. So without, with, just cleans up the signal a lot, leaving only the kick. Gets rid of a bit of the sub stuff. Cool. Then I've got an EQ. This is the SSL emulation. Coffee break. This is the SSL emulation. Sounds great. No high pass filter. I've got. Fuck, I need my glasses on. Should have had these on before, to be honest, and they're dirty. Bear with me. All right, we're good. So about 8 decibels at 2 and a bit kilohertz. I've got it set to the shelf. If you click that in, it means you've got the bell. So this is a high shelf that I've got boosting. So a whole bunch of highs, 4.8 decibels at about 4.3 kilohertz. So a bit of the beta attack, 4.5 at 564 hertz. And both of these mid bells I've got pretty broad so that it's a wider, broader sound that it's boosting. And then a whole bunch of low shelf boost at 76 hertz. So let's listen without it and with it. And then I've got the trimmer just to basically account for the level boost that the EQ added. So without that, so you can actually hear, if I turn it off and on, it just adds a whole bunch of level, and then this just brings it back. And this way, if I bypass the whole VMR virtual mix rack, you can hear what changes you've made. So have a listen. So that is level match, so I can tell whether I like the changes that I've made or not. So that's the kick in with the VMR. After that, I used ProQ. The cool thing about ProQ is you can use an analyzer on another channel and you can basically EQ match. Now what I've done here, because I've got an in kick and an out kick, then I've basically analyzed the kick out microphone, and I have asked ProQ to match that EQ, and then I've basically cut out the frequencies that are very similar to the kick out mic. Now this technique basically means that you're not adding a lot of the same frequencies in both of those mics. You're allowing both of those mics to do their thing and be complementary. I like to get the character from each individual mic, and this kind of allows me to do it. So have a listen without it and with. So really changes the sound of that microphone. But if you have a look at, if I've soloed both the kick in and kick out, you can have a, so let's have a look without that. So without it, you can just tell it's kind of subby and there's not much attack. With it in, it just adds a whole bunch of like clarity. You know, it'll cut through the mix a lot better. Let's see. If I solo all the drums without it, it's just adding a lot of that like attack, which I want from the kick-in mic, which is what's great about the Beta 91E. All right, moving on. Kick out. You can see I've got just the kick out soloed, and we'll go through VMR here. So virtual channel, same, the Neve emulation. Just adds a bit of character. Again, I'm not pushing it so that it's distorting. Gate again. Now that's a huge difference with the gate. Just allowing the kick through. I don't want any of that room sort of sound that the outside kick mic can sometimes bring in. So This gate has really cleaned it up. Love it. Similar settings, pretty simple. I probably would have copied this from the kick in mic across to the kick out mic and then just adjusted it slightly to suit the sound of this kick drum. And again, similar settings here with the SSL EQ, although I'm cutting a lot of stuff instead of boosting. So let's listen without it. The thing that I wanted from this outside kick mic was the thud, the bottom end, the body. The inside kick mic gets a lot of the beta attack, but not a lot of body. It doesn't capture a lot of that bottom end. So having an outside kick mic that is a bass friendly microphone like the Sennheiser 902 or 602, whatever it is, will capture a lot of that bottom end and not much of the top end stuff. So that's what I really want here. So let's listen again without and in. So beautiful. So let's, again, I've got the trimmer just to level match. So have a look here on the meter. If I turn this off, bypass, and then turn it on, the level's pretty much where it was. It's actually a little bit quieter, but anyway, it's all good. Pro Q, again, I had the EQ match. Well, actually, okay, so interesting here. For whatever reason, because I was analyzing both the channels, it's only showing me one. Maybe that's like a complication. If you have them on both channels, it'll only show you the analyzer for the other one, but I essentially did the same thing. So there you go. So a cool thing you can do with the Pro Q3 is also highlight all of these. And if you change the gain, you can actually reverse so that you can see what you're cutting out or adding. So let's do that. Have a listen here. If I reverse it, that's all of the stuff that I'm accentuating. That's an extreme version of it. So that's where I've got it without and with it in. Now, another setting that I always use, or not always, but I like to use on the Pro Q3 is this auto level, because it basically matches the level for you. You don't have to go in and change the output level. So awesome. So then that is busing into the organic kick bus. So let's have a listen to that. So these are the two kick microphones. And again, similar sort of stuff. So Pro Q3, without it, with it, just emphasizing a little bit of clickiness, getting rid of this frequency because it was annoying me. If I turn this up, it's just a bit yucky. So, and then just boosting a little bit at 45 hertz where the fundamental almost sits. It's a little bit lower than the fundamental, meaning that I'm boosting some of the sub information and then cutting a little bit of this out. Only 1 decibel, but it's kind of yucky. So just cleaning that signal up. And then I've got the DS10 drum shaper by XLN. This is just a transient designer. It's really great on drums. So let's have a look at what's that doing. I've got it on the kick setting. I've got it on the natural. These are 3 different algorithms. The natural suited this drum sound the best. Boosting some attack, cutting out some of the sustain and cutting out some of the mojo, and also lowering some of the gain. I've got the soft clipper on. Don't know if it's doing too much. Let's see. Yeah, it's not even lighting up. So it's like a bit of a fail safe. It just softens. If I've got a lot of attack on there, it just softens the attack so that it's not too clicky. Let's listen before. Just adds a little bit of attack and cleans up some of that subby stuff. Again, let's listen to the drum mix and see how that sounds in context. All right, with that off. That's on. So off again. And on. A lot of upper mids, a lot of attack, a lot of punch. That's what I like about that. So from there, I've got a kick trigger. Let's actually skip the kick trigger for now, because when I would have been mixing it, getting the drums to the way I liked it without the triggers, and then adding triggers in to, supplement the sound. So that's how the kicks sounded without any processing. And that's how it sounds with. Awesome. Very, very decent kick drum sound for an organic kick drum with no triggers. You could probably use that as a kick drum sound if you weren't that confident using samples in a way that helps the mix. You could probably use that, but I just find that a lot of the time, especially if it's rock music, you want to add in a supplementary kick sample to give you a beefier sound. All right, let's move on to the snare top. Only one plug-in here, and it is the virtual mix rack. So let's listen to that soloed. And I'm only using one plug-in really, and it's the FGN, which is a Neve EQ emulation. I've got the trimmer at the start and the end so that I can see on the level meter where I need to match it after the EQ. So I would have added that after adding the EQ. This is how the EQ is set. It is plus 3 decibels for the upper shelf, which I think is 12K from memory. 2.8 decibels at 2.6 kilohertz, boosting 7.5 decibels at 423 hertz, and boosting 2 and a bit decibels at 170 hertz. And that's a shelf. You can choose your frequency setting on this version of the Neve EQ. I've also got a bit of a high pass filter going on at 113 hertz. It's pretty subtle from memory, so let's actually listen to what that's doing. Let's leave trimmer on so that we can hear the difference. So before and after. Before, after. So it's not doing a whole lot, but what it is doing is giving it clarity, and it's emphasizing the bottom end at the really punchy, attacky sort of part of where the thud is. Sometimes you want to add more of the boomier frequencies in a snare drum to make it sound really fat. In this instance, I wanted it to sound like a fast attack. All right, moving on. Snare bottom. Let's have a listen to this in isolation. Pretty nice bottom snare. Chloe, the drummer of Bitch Eyes, has a really nice Tama kit, and she's got a Chad Smith snare, and it sounds mint. We tuned it. We spent ages tuning it up to getting it to sound unreal from the get-go. So actually, let's listen to the snare in isolation. So that's both the snare mics dry. Sounds awesome. Anyway, so bottom mic. Now, as everyone should know, with the bottom mic of a snare drum, if you've got a top mic and a bottom mic, they're facing opposite directions, which means that the sound wave's going to hit them. One's going to be positive when the other one's going to be negative. If you know a little bit about sound waves and the science behind sound waves, when a sound hits a microphone, it's either in the positive or the negative. It does both. But when it's very similar distances, if they're facing opposite ways, the sound is hitting them at different times. So what you have to do first of all is flip the phase 180 degrees, meaning that the positive of the top mic and the positive of the bottom mic are hitting the microphones at the same time. So you're basically flipping it. That's the first thing that you want to do with the bottom mic every single time. You'll get a much fuller, fatter snare drum sound. If you notice that when you are miking both and you're getting a thin, weak snare sound, that could be why you might need to flip the phase. So I'll just show you the difference it makes if I solo both of the snare mics. Let's have a listen to flipping the phase. So this is before the phase is flipped and after. Before, after. Much better. What you notice is you get a lot more of the body punch attack. Without it, it kind of sounds wimpy. Yeah, a lot more attack. Love it. All right, Neve. Let's have a listen to this EQ. I've got 3 decibels boosted on the shelf, 6 decibels at 4.5, sorry. 6 decibels at 486 hertz, and then 6 decibels at 177 hertz. And then I've got a high pass set to 128 hertz. So let's have a listen to before and after. Before, after. So a lot more of the snariness. Because of the high pass, you're losing a lot of the bottom end, but I've set the shelf pretty high to bring some more of that back in. You're just losing a lot of the subby stuff. So again, let's listen before and after. What I've done then is sent both of these snare mics to a snare bus, like I was saying before. And the first thing I've got is the gate. So the gate will take out all of the kick drum information and just leave the snare. So this is before and after. So you can see some different settings here. The detection filters, I've cut out a lot of the bottom end because I don't want the kick drum to trigger this gate. And then a little bit of the top end information. The range is a little bit higher on the snare drum because I don't want to completely remove all of the information. I want, when the compressor is in, both of these compressors, it's pretty much gone. Sometimes I only have this set to about 10 decibels because I want some of the room information, like the rest of the drum kit, to still come through. So let's see what that sounds like with the compressors on. Sometimes it can add some interesting information to the rest of the drum sound. But in this one, I had it set to -30, and it's pretty much invisible. The gate's pretty much doing exactly what a gate does, is close the rest of the sound off. All right, next I've got the Distressor emulator. It is set to 2:1, so not a really aggressive setting, but the input is probably driving it quite high. So let's have a listen to that. Yeah. It's redlining, which meaning that it's actually clipping. But because it's a compressor, sometimes that distortion is actually quite nice. And you'll see I've got this distortion setting turned on as well. Slower attack, faster release, and just the output to level match. And I've only got the mix set at 70%, meaning I'm not only hearing the compressor, I'm actually letting some of that dry signal through so that it's not full on compression sort of a sound. It's a more natural way of compressing a snare drum. I'll show you with the full mix. Super squashed. It's a little bit more natural. You're letting a little bit more of the attack through. It just sounds like a little bit more of like you're standing in the room with a snare drum. Then I've got a secondary compressor adding more compression. So let's have a listen to that. What that's doing is adding more of the sustain of the snare, and it's cutting off some of the transient information, which you'll see I add back in. No, actually take some out later. So I want this snare drum to sound really full and fat and still have a lot of attack. Sometimes when you add a lot of compression, it leaves you with a really thin drum sound and just a really snappy, attacky sort of snare. For this song, I wanted it to be full. That's why I've got a fast attack, a fast release. I've got the ratio set to 3.5. It's taking off very little, less than 3 decibels of gain reduction. And again, I've got the mix set to about 70%, so it's still letting some of the natural sound through. So without all of this processing, and with. Sounds great. Again, no EQ at this stage on that snare bus because I had already done some EQing on the individual channel. Let's listen to what this drum shaper's doing. I've got it set to the snare setting, classic mode, adding some body, adding some sustain, taking off some of the attack. Yeah, really extending that snare sound, that the sustain of the snare. Off. On. And Pro Q, just getting rid of some of this frequency here, 216. Let's have a listen. That is the fundamental frequency of the snare drum, but with this out, I would have made this move in the context of the whole mix. I would have just noticed that frequency would have been standing out to me when I was listening to the rest of the song. So that's the snare drum. All right, let's speed things up. I've got the snare trigger here. Actually, we're going to do the triggers later. Rack tom. Let me find a section of the song that has the rack. All right, here we are. Loop. All right. That's the raw rack. There's a bit of distortion going on here. Some processing shit. Sounds a bit okay. It sounds fine. It's not a great tom sound. It's not terrible. Let's see some of the processing that I got going on here. So VMR again, using the gate. Really cleaning up that tom. I don't want too much sustain because when you add, bottom end and EQ and all that sort of stuff, it can end up having a really overwhelming tom sound that can take over the mix. So I like to clean up my toms quite significantly. Have a look at the settings here. I'm not going to go through them because I want to speed up this video. All right, next is this custom series EQ. Now, this is a really gentle EQ, and so you can be quite aggressive with it, and it doesn't add too much like ridiculous EQ sound. If I did these sort of settings with the Neve, it would be extreme EQ. And so I started off here, boosting the high frequency shelf. I think it's a shelf. It could be a bell, but I think it's a shelf at about 7 decibels, 10K. Again, 7.5 decibels at 4K, cutting out about 3 decibels at 400, boosting close to 3 at 200, and I've got a high pass at 100. So let's have a listen to what's that doing. Just making it sound more like a tom sound that you'd want to hear in a recording. Then I've got the FGN, which is the Neve emulation, cutting out 2.5 decibels of the top end, 2.6 at 6.3K, minus 7 decibels at 9.63. So that's scooping it. That's getting rid of a lot of that low-mid mud that we don't want to hear in a tom. We want to hear the body and we want to hear the attack. We don't always want a lot of that mud because it just adds kind of like woof, 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 woofiness, and it's not pleasant to listen to. So minus 2.4 decibels at about 100 hertz. I haven't got the high pass filter in. Let's have a listen to that. Before, after. Again, closer, getting closer to finished tom sound. And then we've got the SSL. So these are the 3 EQs that you can use in Virtual Mix Rack. There's also an API. I don't use that as much. It's got a more specific character to it. I use it sometimes, but not often. Broad, custom series, very, very subtle sort of a sound. It's a finisher EQ, as Stephen Slate would say. The FGN is a really aggressive EQ, so broad, very minor moves to get a big adjustment. And then the SSL is very specific. You can fine tune things a lot easier. You can choose how wide your Q is, things like that. So let's have a listen to what I've got going on here. Boosting almost 2 decibels at about 14K, 3.3 at 6K, 1.5 decibel boost at 216 hertz, and then I haven't touched the low frequency. So let's have a look at what that does. Just cleans it up a little bit. Not a huge change, but it does add a lot more attack. Rack tom. So floor tom. Let's keep moving. Let's keep moving, people. You haven't got all day. All right. Same modules. Again, the gate to clean things up. And you can see this is moving, meaning I've got automation set to this transient detector because sometimes it was letting through the hits and sometimes it wasn't. So you can have a look on the automation here. So that's the automation I've done to the floor tom, meaning that I'm letting some things through the gate and other sections it didn't need to be touched. Hope that makes sense. So let's have a look again. Gate, just cleaning a whole bunch of that unnecessary noise out. The custom series EQ, 2.5 at 10, 3.5 at 4, cutting out 6 and a bit at 800 hertz, and boosting 1.5 at 100 hertz. No filters. I've got a filter high pass at 54, probably not doing much. Sounds nice. FGN, cutting 2.5 decibels, adding close to 3 at 4.8, cutting 4 and a bit at 837 hertz, and then cutting 1.5 at 72 hertz. So let's have a listen. Before, after. Not changing it too much, just getting it closer again to the finished sound. SSL, 2 decibel boost at 14K, close to a 2 decibel at 6.7, close to a 2.4 boost, a wider boost, really broad boost of the bottom end of that floor tom, so 200 hertz, and then I haven't touched the low frequency, so let's see what that does. Less boomy. I made it a bit more punchy. I focused on not the really deep frequencies of that floor tom, because that potentially was too boomy and overwhelming again. I wanted to make it a bit more punchy. So let's listen to those toms before and after. Beautiful. Awesome. Let's listen in the context of the mix before. More attack, more punch, more clarity, Love that. I love those tom sounds. They're awesome. Again, Chloe's kit, mint. All right, overheads. Now, as I said before, I've got the left and right into a stereo bus. There's other ways that you can do this. You can consolidate into a one stereo channel, but this is easier for me. I just leave these at 0 decibels and put them into this bus. All right, let's listen to the dry signal. I'll focus on a part where they're using the crashes, where Chloe's hitting the crash a lot, because you'll notice the changes I've made. You'll notice the changes I made pretty easily when the crash is going on overheads. So first in the channel, first is the SSL 400 emulation of the 4000E, sorry. Great plug-in. The total harmonic distortion on this thing is crazy good. It just fucking makes it sound mint. All right, quite a lot to show you here. I've got a high pass set pretty high. I've got a low pass set because it cuts out some of the tinniness. I am not compressing it. I am boosting about 5 decibels at 15K shelf, boosting 4 decibels at 5.4K, pretty wide sort of a Q, cutting out 8 or close to 9 decibels at 863 hertz. So that's getting rid of this specific frequency because I've got a narrow Q set up. And then I'm boosting 5 decibels at 264. Is that? Fuck. Sorry, my sight is not great. All right, so let's have a listen. Before and after. Before. After. Just, I mean, a lot of people say that you shouldn't cut out a lot of the bottom end on overhead mics. I say do whatever the fuck you want. In this instance, I wanted it to only showcase the cymbals, and that's what I did. Next, Pro Q. Let's have a listen. I'm doing a whole lot of cutting at various areas. Getting rid of that. Sometimes you can get that in overheads where it's the cymbals and the air that sometimes add this unfriendly like it sounds like air. So you can notice here. Just cleaning it up, and again I've got the auto setting here so that it accounts for the level that I've cut. So you can hear the changes that you've made. So cutting a whole bunch of these guys. Let's have a listen. Cutting that out. That's all that air that I was talking about that I didn't want. That like, and this, just a yucky frequency. So without these in, and within. Huge difference. Cutting that frequency out and cutting this frequency a little bit. Before, after. Then I've got, I don't use this plugin very often. Old mate Nick from Panorama loves this plugin on a master. He probably uses it in a mix as well. I used it in this instance. It's pretty transparent. That's something that is really good at it, and it's got very specific settings that you can use to your advantage. In this instance, the main things I did was set the ratio to 3:1, soft knee, didn't touch this guy, threshold, attack, and a fast release or medium fast release. Let's have a listen. Before, after. Squashing it, just squashing it a shitload, to be honest. Getting rid of a lot of the transient information. I don't like it when you can hear like the sticks hit the cymbal. That's why I like a softer sort of a fuller overhead sound. Again. So just getting rid of a lot of that that happens when the sticks hit the cymbal. This is a lot easier to hear in the context of the whole drum mix. So let's solo all the drums. I'll turn the compression off and then turn it on. Just a lot softer. You're not hearing all of that that you can hear with drums sometimes. Moving on, hats. Let's have a listen to these. Let's find a section that there are some hats. Here we go. All right. All right. All right, so I'm just using VMR on this. Let's turn all this off. Cutting 3.5 decibels at about 5.5. Cutting 3.2 decibels at two and a bit. Okay. Now, both of these are a really, really wide Q setting, which means I'm cutting heaps of, like a broad range of the sound. So let's have a listen again before and after. It's just getting rid of a lot of that bottom end that I don't want in a hi-hat mic. And this next processor, EQ Air EQ, this will just boost a lot of that top end that I want in a hi-hat, just really like shiny hi-hat sound. So before, yeah, super shiny sounding. One thing that is worth doing if you have this plugin, it's a really cool plugin. If you change the Q and the frequency range of where this high cut is, it can actually add a bit of a boost at the frequency setting. So this can be really cool to boost a certain area that you want to boost while also cutting everything below it. So I'll show you what I mean. If I cycle through this frequency here, I've got a really like high Q setting, which means it's peaking at that section that I want it to peak at. So I'll show you, I've got it set to 13K. If I lower the Q, you'll notice that there's not a boost at that area that I've got it set. It's softer. Hear how it like loses some of that shininess? It's because it's not boosting at the frequency setting. Lot shinier. I like it. Beautiful. Then I got trimmer to account for the level. So let's before. Awesome. Really shiny sheen on that hi-hat. And then I've just got a little bit of compression going on. Full mix, slow attack, medium release, and let's hear how that's going. Because of the medium release and the slow attack, I'm adding a lot of the impact. This makes a huge difference when you're at a point when there's a closed hi-hat. So let me find a part of the song where she's doing some closed hi-hats. So where are we? Here we go. So before, after. Just getting a lot of that attack, which I want in the hi-hat. Just makes it a bit more clear. Moving on, ride cymbal. There's not much ride in this song. So I'll just highlight the section where she hits it a little bit. That's really, there's only a couple of times that she actually hits the ride. So let's have a look. I've only got one module on, the FGN. So let's listen. This is before and after. Just adding a whole lot of brightness. Again, she doesn't hit the ride cymbal that often, so I didn't need to process it that much. I only wanted a bit of EQ to brighten it up and just blend that into the rest, because you are getting the ride cymbal in the overheads anyway, so it's kind of just blending it in just to add a little bit more clarity to the ride cymbal. So have a listen just to the overheads. Getting a lot of the attack of the ride. And this actual ride mic is adding a lot of the overall cymbal sound. See? That wash of the ride that you get there. Love it. Moving on. Rooms. I love room mics. I love playing around with them, getting to sound huge. Sometimes you just want them to fill up the whole drum picture. Sometimes you want to crush the shit out of them to get a really aggressive room sound. So let's see what I did here. Again, stereo, left and right, room, left and right, sending them at 0 decibels to a bus and processing them both together. First of all, Pro Q. Let's see what that's doing. It's doing some surgery on the room mics. Let's listen to the room mics isolated by themselves with no processing. Actually, let's find an area. Again, I'm going to go to that part with the crashy stuff going on because that's when you can really hear where your attack and release settings and the compression and all that sort of stuff are affecting the overall room sound. Sometimes you want it to be really squashed and have the cymbals kind of going shh. Sometimes you don't want that. You want the kick and snare to be really clear and just adding like a lot of the body of the drum sound. So let's see what I did in this instance. So it's an all right room sound. It's probably a little bit too wide. Probably had the mics a little bit further out than I should have. But it sounds like 2 drum mics in a room. All right, Pro Q. Yeah, clarity, just cutting out some of that bottom end and these surgical moves. Before. Just cleaning it up a bit, getting rid of some of the boominess, some of the cymbal wash. So this is the main, this is like doing all the work, this plugin, the SSL 4000E emulation by Brainworks. All right, high pass at 77, low pass at about 12, boosting 8.8 decibels at 4-ish, boosting, cutting 3 decibels at 4.5, pretty wide Q setting, cutting 3 decibels at 1.2K, again, pretty wide setting, and then boosting some of the bottom end 125 hertz. I've got the alternate EQ type in. This is, I think, from the G console that it allows you to use both EQ types for the bottom end, and it just changes the sound a little bit. Have a listen to both of those. See, with it out, it's kind of like more body. With it in, it's more focused. I just liked it in this instance. Now I've got some compression going on. The layout of these Brainworks console emulations is a bit fucked in my opinion because it's not like a top-down thing. It's like you're going left to right, but then the level meters are here. In some of the other consoles, they're in different areas. It's a bit hard to navigate, but it sounds amazing, so it's worth it. Here's where you can see how much compression is going on. So I've got fuckloads, like up to 14 decibels of EQ, of compression going on. So the threshold's set really high, the compression's set really high. I've got the fast attack on, and the release is set to 0.25 seconds, which is a medium-ish sort of a release. So let's take out this compression. And put it back in. I'm not like squashing it too much. I'm just taking off some of the impact of the kick and the snare, because sometimes you don't want that washiness. When you compress shit heaps, sometimes brings out the washiness of the cymbal, and I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to cut out the peaks of the kick and snare a little bit, just to glue it in a bit. All right, so that's that. Then I've got another Pro Q doing some more surgical moves. Let's have a listen. Not too much. It's just I would have noticed in the context of the whole drum sound, these guys would have been offending me. So let's have a listen to what they are. That's just like cutting. It's like a shelf, a really broad shelf, and it's only cutting out 1.3 decibels, so it's not really doing much. This guy, this, and this. Stop soloing that, man. And then that guy. So very subtle changes. They're all only like, maximum of 4 decibels of reduction, but it just is a really subtle kind of shift of tone of the overall drum sounds before and after. So let's turn all of that processing off. That's the original room mic sound, and this is with the processing on. There's quite a lot of compression going on, overall tone sculpting. It's just closer to how I want the rooms to sound. Awesome, we're nearly done. Thank you for sticking around and watching this far. Hope it's not been boring. All right, the drum bus. I showed you this before, but let's look at it again. Actually, I've forgotten the kick and snare triggers, so let's have a look at them, the samples. All right, kick sample. Now, I want to show you here. This is how I add samples. This is a Studio One thing. Basically, I use the impact. Oh, this is it's cooked itself here. Hang on. There we go. All right, so impact is just a drum pad, and I've imported this kick sample, which is a kick that I used in a Lemon Days track, and I've exported it. It will be available in my soon-to-be-released sample pack. Stay tuned for that. And I haven't done much to it. I've just set where I want the actual kick to start, the sample to start. If you don't have that set, you can have a little bit of a time delay before the trigger actually happens. Then I've got precision time align. So no EQ, no compression, nothing, because that kick sample sounds unreal as it is. I'm just time delaying. I'm actually adjusting it to be earlier to line up with the rest of the kit. So see if you can hear the difference. It's probably really subtle, but it makes such a big difference. Let's have a look. Hang on a sec. All right. So before the precision time align and after. Before, after. Just adds a bit of body, a little bit of the sub information, and then I've just got it blended in. So without the kick trigger and with before and after. Great stuff. Like, just adds a lot of like the subby bottom end that I really like in a kick drum, and a little bit of attack, not too much in this instance. A lot of the attack's coming from the organic kick mics. Let's have a look at the snare trigger. All right, so same thing. I would have, let's have a look, used Impact XT. So that's the snare drum. I've got 2 of them one for main hits and one for ghost notes, which I've got a cutoff filter on and changed the attack. So I've got a slower attack. So if I really change that, you'll hear how it sounds. Just makes it a softer hit, which is what a ghost stroke sounds like. Pretty cool. So if I undo that again, it'll go back to rendered audio, and let's have a look at the processing on this channel. So I've got the DS10 adding some attack and cutting off some of the sustain. Subtle. I wanted to be punchier in the mix. I would have done this in context. I would have been hearing that the snare was lingering for too long. Let's see if you can tell. Here we go. Without. And with it in. Subtle. Just adds a little bit more attack and takes away some of the sustain. All right. Let's listen to what I've done with Pro Q, cutting out this bottom end from 80 hertz, 186, and a 10K cut. Yeah, for whatever reason, this sample was really tinny in that area. So I'll show you if I boost it. Just get rid of some of that digital sort of snare sound that I didn't want, and just some of this body. There's too much going on. Just a close to 2 decibel cut, very subtle. All right. Again, let's go to this drum bus and we'll start to wrap up. Before, after. Mate, what a significant difference that is. Just adding one compressor and some EQ and huge difference. Like, that's massive. That is what kind of gives the drum its sound, the drum kit its sound. All right, let's quickly go to these verbs. So I've got 2 snare reverbs and an overall drum verb. Let's listen to the first snare reverb. I'll actually go to a part where the snare's happening heaps. All right. So using this Oracle verb, this is an interesting plugin. It's pretty versatile. You choose, it's only got one sort of reverb sound, but what you can do with it, with the imaging, you can cut some of the frequencies out, you can add saturation, you can add compression, all in this one plugin. So it's pretty crazy reverb. Again, it is only the one reverb sound, so you don't have a lot of, you can't change it to a plate, you can't change it to a room reverb. It's just the one reverb sound, but it sounds pretty nice. So have a listen. Let's turn all of this shit off. So turn this saturation off. Turn the imaging off. That is the reverb sound. We've got a little bit of pre-delay. This is where you set the length of the reverb, dampness, and how much of the mix you want. Because I've got this on an effects channel or an auxiliary channel, I want it full mix because I only want the reverb sound. I've already got the snare here. Let me solo these snares so you can see what it's doing. I'll add the imaging, add the saturation back in. And then just some EQ, cutting out some of the shit that I didn't want. Let's have a listen. That saturation on this plugin is crazy. I've got it cranked. See how it's squashing the reverb? It's fucking cool. All right, second snare reverb is this one. So in this instance, I am using the Verb Suite, and it's a room snare. So bigger, fuller, doing a little bit of EQing, making it a little bit wider. Less wide, because I didn't want it to be as into the stereo field as it was. Then I am doing some EQ and some virtual channel on it. Make it sound less digital. And getting rid of that top end. Just sounds too digital and fake. And then some more EQ. Cutting out bottom end, adding some of the high mids. Beautiful. Before, after. This is something that I'll do all the time on reverbs, is not just have this one reverb setting. I'll sometimes compress it and EQ just to manipulate that reverb sound even more, to get it to sit better in the mix, to get it to complement the snares a lot more. So again, let's listen to those snares and we'll hear them with both of these reverbs. So reverb 1 and reverb 2. And adding both of them. Just a really nice snare reverb combination. Just adds more kind of length to the snare, and it just gives it a more interesting sort of less dead sound. So you can hear without it. It's still got some roominess because of that trigger, that sample that I've used, but I wanted more. I want it to be in more of a space. So that's what those reverbs do. You can probably hardly hear it in the whole mix. You can definitely hear the reverb. It is definitely there. It just kind of adds a little bit more, interest to the overall drum sound. And then I've got this drum verb. So again, I'm using Oracle, slower pre-delay, longer reverb, more dampening. I've tilted it towards the right for some reason. It must have, I don't know if that was an accident. That's a weird move, but I did it. Cut some of the bottom end and some of the top end. Let's listen to that. Yeah, it was super boomy. You'll see that I'm sending pretty much everything to this reverb. Rack, floor, hats, ride, overheads, rooms, kick, snare. I'm sending it all into this drum reverb. And then no effects are going on there, and some compression. Without it. With it. It's really nice, just squashes it all in place. And then some EQ. Cutting out all of this stuff. And this. Again, making it sound less digital. When you leave a lot of that top end in a reverb, especially a digital reverb, it just sounds so shit, just fake. Kind of just awkward drum reverb. I don't like it. That's it. That's the drums on this song, Booze Song by Bitch Eyes. I hope this was helpful. Thank you again for watching all the way through. Love you. Thank you so much. My name's Stu Watts. Share this around, subscribe, all of that bullshit. Do it. It really helps. Thank you so much. Have a good day.